Members of the head table. Huh? We're going to ask our honoree, Mr. Hoenlein, Mr. Gertler. I see. Okay, so put him right here. So where's his tag? He doesn't have a tag. That's fine. Senator, right here. Right here. Eric? The video guy, John? Good afternoon. My name is Ezra Friedlander from Project Legacy, and I have the good fortune of making, I believe, a very important introduction. You know, this is a Jewish event, and we're actually starting not only on time, but 2 minutes before. So let's give ourselves a warm round of applause that we're starting on time. Without further ado, our captain, program chairman, someone who breathes and lives Jewish heritage 365 days a year, my colleague, my mentor, I admire him, I love him. Ladies and gentlemen, Greg Rosenbaum, our MC.
Thank you for those kind words, Ezra. Welcome to the Jewish Heritage Celebration on Capitol Hill, which has been held to celebrate Jewish American Heritage Month every year, other than the COVID years, since 2010. A lot has happened since we last met in this room last year. Both houses of Congress unanimously passed resolutions recognizing the significance of Jewish American Heritage Month. At the end of May 2023, the first ever national strategy to counter anti-Semitism was released by the White House. You should all read it if you haven't had a chance. I've got a copy of it here. It's quite a document. Of course, on October 7th, 2023, Hamas terrorists attacked Israel in an unprovoked act of aggression, ruthlessly slaughtering innocent Israeli civilians in a kibbutz, attending a music festival, and elsewhere, in the largest attack on the Jewish people since the Holocaust. More than 200 Israelis, including children, women, and elderly people, were taken hostage. About half of the hostages were foreign nationals or holders of multiple citizenships, including 12 Americans. As of today, it is believed Hamas still holds 130 hostages, including 8 Americans. We can never rest until all the hostages are returned. On April 13, 2024, Iran directly attacked Israel from the air for the first time ever, with a massive assault involving more than 300 drones and missiles. An unprecedented alliance of Israel, the United States, and countries from Europe and the Middle East itself combined to effectively thwart the Iranian aggression. So we find ourselves gathered here today to celebrate the contributions of American Jews to American life, but we do so under a cloud of concern for the hostages, for Israel, and for rising anti-Semitism here at home. I want to acknowledge the efforts of Mississippi Senator Cindy Hyde-Smith, who secured this beautiful room for us. Unfortunately, she's not able to join us to speak, but sends her regards. We should also recognize Char Bar, the kosher restaurant of downtown DC, for catering this wonderful lunch. I want to acknowledge the Weitzman National Museum of American Jewish History, which has led the JAM effort for the last few years. And I want to give a special shout out to Emily August, who coordinates all the organizations and efforts which make May so incredible. For more information, go to jewishamericanheritage.org. We have an exceptional lineup of speakers today, many of whom have taken time out of their busy schedules to be with us today. Please show them respect by keeping your conversations to a minimum while listening to what our speakers have to say. Silencing your cell phones would be a great idea. And we'll move right on to the program because Senator Blumenthal is here already. And I will take just a minute to try to do him justice with an introduction. Senator Richard Blumenthal is the senior senator from Connecticut and one of 9 Jewish members of the United States Senate. Before his election to the Senate, he was Attorney General of Connecticut for 10 years. Senator Blumenthal was born in Brooklyn, the son of a German father who fled the Nazis in 1935, the same year that the Nuremberg laws were propagated. He sits on the Judiciary, Armed Services, Veterans Affairs, and Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs committees, as well as the Special Committee on Aging. On Judiciary, he chairs the Subcommittee on Privacy, Technology, and the Law, while on Homeland Security, he chairs the Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations. He is a member of the Senate Bipartisan Task Force for Combating Anti-Semitism. Among his many accomplishments, Senator Blumenthal is the leading voice in the Senate on issues related to sports, where he champions the interests of fans and athletes. Senator Blumenthal has spoken at this luncheon every year in which I have been involved. Indeed, it would not be a Jewish Heritage Celebration without Senator Richard Blumenthal.
Thank you so much, Greg. Some of you may remember the last luncheon last year. I was on a walker because I had broken my leg and I was still recovering from surgery, and I'm glad to tell you I'm up and around, and I would not miss this luncheon in any event because all of you are here, and I am always inspired, really energized and inspired to be with you. So thank you for being here. And every one of you deserves that round of applause. Thank you to Greg, who is such a really treasured friend, who embodies the dedication to our heritage and history and culture and our faith that motivates every one of us and is top of mind for me every day. And I want to remind you who I am because this was my name plate, which actually is pretty good. I could pose as any senator. I would just fill in who it was. So I'm easily replaceable. And I want to emphasize, first of all, I think it goes without saying in this group, that I will stand with Israel today, tomorrow, forever. I know we're not here about Israel, we're here about heritage, but I just want to recount to you, having heard about this latest video that has been released, a story, an anecdote about one of my trips to Israel since October 7th. In the weeks after October 7th, I visited Israel. I was with the War Cabinet. The videos of the atrocities of October 7th were not yet public, but we were shown them by Prime Minister Netanyahu and the War Cabinet. We met with them. It was a bipartisan trip. And at the end of it, our stomachs were turning. And one of the senior ministers said to us, "These people tried to run and hide. All of our history, all of our heritage, we have tried to run and hide. Israel was supposed to be the place where we did not have to run and hide. We have to destroy Hamas." I have cousins who are in Israel now, family there, a cousin who is in the IDF at the front. My father came here. He ran from Germany, and he was among the lucky. We lost, as many of you did, relatives during the Holocaust. Those losses are part of who we are. They are part of our history and part of our heritage. Maybe not what we want to highlight as the most positive part of our heritage, but they are the reason why we need to stand firm, stand strong, speak out against the rising tide of hate and anti-Semitism in this country, and stand strong with Israel. And I just want to thank all of you for your commitment, your dedication to this cause, and why I will continue to condemn the ICC for this absolutely abhorrent act in seeking an arrest warrant that has no foundation in fact or law. By the way, you know, most of my life I've spent as a prosecutor, and this kind of action is absolutely abhorrent to any prosecutor with integrity and common sense. So I think the United States has to stand up against this effort to seek an arrest warrant for Israeli leaders, putting them in a kind of equivalence with Hamas, which is not only absurd, but repugnant. We are here to celebrate heritage, and I am especially honored to be here with two great leaders of our heritage, two great statesmen. First and foremost, we extend our appreciation to Malcolm Hoenlein, who has spent decades in leadership on countless issues related to world Jewry, and he has led many, many around the world. He's traveled the world, meeting with world leaders and Jewish communities, with his extensive speaking engagements across the United States, abroad, and in the Middle East. And his outstanding work for decades as the Executive Vice Chairman of the Conference of Presidents of Major American Jewish Organizations, and as the founding Executive Director of the Greater New York Conference on Soviet Jewry, has made his name synonymous with Jewish leadership. We're not the first to acknowledge Mr. Hoenlein because he has received many awards and tributes from Yeshiva University, State of Israel Bonds, and President Reagan. And he also was designated as recipient of the Trustee of Jerusalem Award in 2007 from the Mayor of Jerusalem. Equally deserving of our admiration is Eric Gertler, whose dedication to public service and contributions to the Jewish community has been nothing short of amazing, extraordinary. His service to New York is well known beyond the boundaries of New York. I'm from Connecticut, and Eric Gertler is very well known to us in Connecticut, not only because he is Executive Chairman and Chief Executive Officer of U.S. News and World Report, and his leadership has been instrumental in shaping the discourse on global affairs, but also because he has given so much to other organizations, to New York itself in its economic development, but also on boards like the Center for Public Leadership at the Harvard Kennedy School, Tel Aviv University, and Hebrew University. His commitment to advancing education and fostering international cooperation is renowned. And his role as chairman of the American-Israel Friendship League exemplifies his unwavering dedication to solidifying relations between the United States and Israel. We celebrate these two extraordinary men as embodying the best of our dedication to heritage, to our Jewish heritage, to our pride and joy in our faith, and to making sure that our children, my 4 children, 2 of them have served in the military, one as a Marine Corps infantry officer in Afghanistan, the other as a Navy SEAL our children understand the inextricable and unbreakable bond that we have as a matter of our own national security with Israel. And our heritage, our common heritage, our dedication to democracy, to the principles of freedom and free expression, which we see every day in the streets of Israel and in this country. And I guarantee you that terrorist organizations or their supporters, like Iran, China, Russia, would not tolerate for 1 second those freedoms or the expression of criticism that we see every day in America and every day in Israel. It is part of our heritage that we celebrate those freedoms, democracy, the independence that is vital to both America and Israel. So I'm very proud to be here today and to be involved in presenting this award to Eric Gertler.
Malcolm, I want to. Malcolm, Senator, could you just join for the photo? Senator Shaheen, could you just join for the photo? Sure. Right here, right here. Senator? Right, I want you to join for the photo.
You're looking at everyone.
Look at the guy with the beard. This is a Jewish event, so the food is meant to be eaten.
Our next speaker is Senator Jean Shaheen. She serves as the senior senator from New Hampshire. Prior to the Senate, she served as governor of New Hampshire and director of the Institute of Politics at the Harvard Kennedy School. Jean Shaheen is the first woman in American history to be elected both governor and senator. What has always driven Jean Shaheen was a commitment to education. She taught school in Mississippi and continued teaching when she moved to New Hampshire. In her first race for governor, she focused on school funding, and promised to expand kindergarten. Senator Shaheen chairs the Small Business and Entrepreneurship Committee and sits on the Committee of Foreign Relations, where she chairs the Subcommittee on Europe and Regional Security Cooperation. She also serves on Armed Services and Appropriations, where she chairs the Commerce, Justice, and Science Subcommittee. Senator Shaheen also serves on the Select Committee on Ethics. She is a member of the Senate Bipartisan Task Force for Combating Anti-Semitism. Senator Shaheen is a widely acclaimed voice on American foreign policy and is in line to become the next chair or ranking member of the Foreign Relations Committee in the next Congress. It is a great privilege to introduce Senator Jean Shaheen.
Thank you so much, Greg. And thank you to all of you. It's so nice to... I thought he was telling me to shush. I'm used to that. I think it's the mic. Well, it's very nice to be with all of you again this year. I was saying, particularly in a year like this, to be here with all of you to celebrate the contributions of Jewish Americans is a reminder of the times that we are in and how important it is for each of us to be a messenger about what we want to see in the world. Again, it's nice to be able to celebrate Jewish American Heritage Month. I know that we're supposed to eat the food. One of these times I'm going to be able to come to this event and actually be able to stay and eat the food, because one of the things I've learned in politics is that whenever you never pass up a meal when you have the chance, or a bathroom. But to be serious, it is never more important that we stand as one and denounce the surge of anti-Semitism that we're experiencing in America and too many other places in the world. We've got to do a better job of preventing hate of all kinds, and that includes redoubling our efforts to prioritize education about the Holocaust. The status quo is simply not acceptable in America and abroad. So the work for that really begins at home. It begins with events like this, with work of that all of you are doing to celebrate the Jewish heritage in America. It's why it's important that we come together, that we share our experiences, that we talk about what brings us together as Americans, just like you're doing today. It's why I'm incredibly honored to be standing here with two leading voices in the Jewish American community, with Malcolm Hoenlein. Congratulations. It's so nice to be able to meet you and join you today. And Eric Gertler. I was joking with Eric that Eric and Malcolm now have their own chocolate bar that they can market. But both men have devoted their lives to advancing the shared interests and concerns of the Jewish community here and abroad. Their leadership through activism and public service has contributed to a vibrant, diverse community that's united in its commitment to a better future for America. We are here today to celebrate that unity, the many contributions of Jewish Americans to our shared values, culture, and ideas. And perhaps one of the most important contributions has been and continues to be that determination to make the United States a better country. Whether that's through journalism, through art, through education, through activism or public service, at every point throughout American history, Jewish Americans have helped shape our ideas of what it means to be an American. That continues today, and I, for one, am very appreciative and thank you for everything you do to make the United States a better home for everyone. So thank you for having me here, and congratulations again.
Senator Pete Ricketts is the junior senator from Nebraska, having previously served as Nebraska's 40th governor for 8 years. After business school, he worked for Union Pacific Railroad and an environmental consulting firm before joining the family business, which later became TD Ameritrade, where he ultimately became the chief operating officer. Senator Ricketts sits on the Committee on Environment and Public Works, where he is the ranking member on the Subcommittee on Clean Air, Climate, and Nuclear Safety. The Committee on Foreign Relations, where he is the ranking member on the Subcommittee on Europe and Regional Security Cooperation, and on the Special Committee on Aging. As governor, he signed into law legislation he supported to create an official Jewish American Heritage Month in Nebraska. We're delighted to have him with us today, celebrating National Jewish American Heritage Month on Capitol Hill. Please welcome Senator Pete Ricketts.
Well, thank you very much. It is a privilege to be able to be here with you today to celebrate Jewish Heritage Month nationally, as well as what we've been able to do in Nebraska. And in Nebraska, Jewish Americans have been living, working, and worshiping since the mid-1840s and have made and continue to make tremendous contributions to our community. Henry Monsky actually provided $90 to Father Flanagan so he could start his Home for Boys, which became Boys Town, which has helped tens of thousands of kids over the last century and so to be able to be taken care of and integrated back into society. We've got fantastic people who have started great companies, like JJ and BA Simon, who took their little butcher company and grew it into Omaha Steaks. Or Rose Blumpkin, who created Nebraska Furniture Mart, and created another wonderful family business that has created tremendously to our state's economy, but is also nationally known. Johnny Rosenblatt, who was our mayor from 1954 to 1961, promoted sports and advocated for building a baseball stadium. And that baseball stadium not only allowed us to be able to draw in a AAA ball club to the city of Omaha, but also a home for the College World Series. And now the College World Series has been in Omaha for over 50 years. So we continue to see that contribution from our Jewish American citizens. Also in the field of philanthropy, B'nai B'rith, one of the first chapters was started in Omaha, creating lots of opportunities for service to members of our communities and giving back to the community. So we want to celebrate the work of our Jewish American citizens and what they do for our community. And Jewish American Heritage Month gives us the opportunity to be able to do that. And so it's a privilege to be able to be here today to do it nationally, because Jewish Americans have contributed so much to my home state of Nebraska. And today we are saluting two remarkable individuals whose dedication and service and advocacy has left an indelible mark not only on our nation, but also on the Jewish community and in the United States and beyond. First and foremost, we extend our heartfelt appreciation to Malcolm Hoenlein for his great work. He spent decades in leadership on countless issues related to world Jewry and leading others. In fact, I understand that you worked with President Reagan to start the first, it was Jewish Heritage Week. It wasn't a whole month, it was a week, and you got it with Ronald Reagan. That's fantastic. Mr. Hoenlein has traveled the world meeting with world leaders and Jewish communities, coupled with his extensive speaking engagements across the United States and abroad on international relations, Israel, and Middle East affairs, and the American Jewish community. Has established him as a true luminary in Jewish leadership. Malcolm's outstanding work for decades as Executive Vice Chairman of the Conference of Presidents of major American Jewish organizations, and as the founding Executive Director of the Greater New York Conference on Soviet Jewry, and has made Mr. Hoenlein's name synonymous with Jewish leadership. We are not the first to acknowledge that all Mr. Hoenlein has done and accomplished, as he has received many awards and tributes from Yeshiva University, Touro College, State of Israel Bonds, and President Ronald Reagan. Malcolm was also designated as the recipient of the Trustee of Jerusalem Award in 2007 from the Mayor of Jerusalem. And of course, Malcolm's been a tremendous leader in the Jewish community for many, many years, and we really appreciate all that you've done for our country and for the world. Equally deserving of our admiration is Eric Gertler, whose dedication to public service and contributions to the Jewish community has been nothing short of exemplary. Eric Gertler serves as the Executive Chairman and Chief Executive Officer of U.S. News and World Report, and his leadership has been instrumental in shaping the discourse on global affairs. His active involvement in various boards, including the Center for Public Leadership at the Harvard Kennedy School, Tel Aviv University, and Hebrew University, underscores his commitment to advancing education and fostering international cooperation. Additionally, his role as chairman of the American Israel Friendship League exemplifies his unwavering dedication to solidifying relations between the U.S. and Israel. We are here today to celebrate both extraordinary men, not only for their accomplishments, but also to acknowledge their impact as leaders in their respective communities. And I just want to say thank you again for giving me the opportunity to be here to celebrate Jewish heritage in our country, the tremendous contributions Jewish Americans have made to our great nation and to my state of Nebraska, and also want to reemphasize what some of the other speakers have said, is that it's not only important to recognize the contribution that Jewish Americans have made to our nation, but it's also important because we need to send a very clear message in these times that anti-Semitism will not be tolerated in our society, and that we have to stomp it out every opportunity we see. Oh, and just because I also am from Nebraska, one other thing I forgot to mention is that WR Reserve is a company in Nebraska that processes meat, and we're actually the only kosher provider of beef to the state of Israel, and we're very proud of that little factoid as well. So thank you all very much again. I appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Thank you.
I can't do this job by myself, so I've enlisted some assistants. And here to introduce Senator Rosen is one of our honorees, Eric Gertler.
I'm always happy to help you out. You do such a great job. It is my privilege to introduce Jackie Rosen, who is the junior senator from Nevada and one of 9 Jewish members of the Senate. Senator Rosen is co-chair of the Senate Bipartisan Task Force for Combating Anti-Semitism and co-founder and co-chair of the Bipartisan Abraham Accords Caucus, a member of the Senate Committees on Small Business and Entrepreneurship, Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs, Commerce, Science and Transportation, and Armed Services. She chairs the Commerce Committee's Subcommittee on Tourism, Trade, and Export Promotion. She's been ranked as one of the most bipartisan senators, with more than 90% of the legislation she's introduced having co-sponsors from across the aisle. Unique among her peers here on Capitol Hill, Senator Rosen served as the president of her congregation, Ner Tamid, in Henderson, Nevada. In May 2023, she co-sponsored the introduction of Senate Resolution 203, both bipartisan and bicameral, to recognize the significance of Jewish American Heritage Month, which passed by unanimous consent. The companion House Resolution 382 also passed unanimously. In April 2024, she introduced the Countering Anti-Semitism Act with 26 co-sponsors, 8 of whom are speaking to us today. I might also add, with a little bit of a plug, Nevada is number 5 on the U.S. News best states in terms of its economy. But it is my pleasure to have her join us again for our Jewish Heritage Celebration. Please welcome Senator Jackie Rosen.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. It's good to be back. Eric, thank you for that introduction. And Ezra Friedlander, always for organizing this amazing event. I look out here and yes, right there. I didn't see where you were behind me. Thank you. It's just really wonderful to see this room, every year, and it makes me so very proud. And the Jewish leaders, every single one of you here, every single one of you, have made a difference, working in your own way to lift up your own communities, our communities, and improve the lives of so many. In particular, I'm going to talk about our honorees. I want to recognize both of them. Eric Gertler, Malcolm Hoenlein. What? Oh, that's Ben. There's Malcolm right there. So I want to switch you guys. Wait a minute. And, both of them dedicated their life work to building a more engaged society. And I am the only former synagogue president and the only Jewish woman to currently serve in the United States Senate. And I am proud to, the only Jewish mother in the United States Senate. And I'm just so proud to be able to celebrate Jewish American Heritage Month, to talk about our shared heritage, our shared history, our accomplishments, and our hopes, what we hope for. And so as Jewish Americans, we are guided by our values to call upon us to build for a better future. In particular, the value of tikkun olam. It's what motivates me, it's what motivates us all to leave the world a better place than how we found it. It's actually the reason why I entered public service in the first place, and it's the reason why I do this work today. Because everything I do to improve the lives of families, to improve the lives of our constituencies, it matters. Tikkun olam matters, repairing the world matters, leaving the world a better place than how you found it matters. Every one of you know that. And it's why I've been fighting since day one that I got here, to root out hate, discrimination, and bigotry. And I'm willing to bet, as I look around this room, that most of you here have a story or a moment in your lives where you faced anti-Semitism. And the sad reality is, now our kids do too. We've seen rise in this hate across the country over the last few years. It has been skyrocketing out of control, and has skyrocketed even more after Hamas's brutal attack on Israel on October 7th. Families being assaulted in the streets. Jewish businesses, places of worship being vandalized, students being harassed, not just on college campuses. I can tell you story after story in my state, K through 12, even pre-K, kids and families being harassed. American Jews are being targeted solely for who they are, threatened and attacked, and it must stop. And I've made it my priority to do everything I can at a federal level. As a co-founder of the first ever Senate Bipartisan Task Force for Combating Anti-Semitism, and I see my co-chair, James Langford, here. Both of us together, we've been working to push back against hate and discrimination in all forms, wherever it is most prevalent, wherever it is most prevalent. And that's why we're advocating for the Senate to take up and pass the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act. It's also why Senator Langford and I work together to create the Bipartisan Countering Anti-Semitism Act, which we just recently introduced, which is the most comprehensive legislation to combat anti-Jewish bigotry ever introduced in Congress. It's a big deal. We worked so hard. I'm so proud to have his partnership, and we currently have dozens and dozens of sponsors, D's and R's equally matched on our Countering Anti-Semitism bill. And what this bill does is it takes concrete actions, including establishing a national coordinator to counter anti-Semitism in the United States, to lead this new interagency task force. And we know, every one of us here knows how important education is. Why do we study? We study to learn about the past and protect the future. And so we know the most powerful and effective tool against ignorance and hate is also education. And so I'm working to reauthorize and extend my Never Again Education law, which was signed into law by former President Trump and is set to expire in 2025. And this law does something really important. It helps provide teachers the resources and training to educate our students on the important lessons of the Holocaust, because only through this education can we ensure that this doesn't happen again, and that never again really does mean never again. And I know that the hearts of so many in our community, not so many, everyone I talk to in our community, are heavy right now, anxious, fearful. And it feels like sometimes we're alone and that nobody's listening. But one thing about our Judaism is we are a hopeful people. And it is that hope that helps us. It's always had to be there. It's led us to accomplish so much through our generations, through adversity. Our hope is our resiliency. We all know that. This time is no different. So I want us to remember to continue to hold our values in our hearts, encourage those around us to continue to repair the world, be strong, be hopeful, be optimistic about creating a future, educating people about hate and against bigotry, because we have the responsibility not to just make this nation world better for ourselves, but for our children and the future generations. So I want to give a hearty mazel tov. We can sing mazel tov and simon tov, there you go, to Malcolm and Eric. I appreciate, that's the synagogue president in me, I'm going in for the song. Your work is amazing. We so appreciate you, and thank you for having me here today.
So in keeping with that new practice, I'd like to call upon our honoree, Malcolm Hoenlein, to introduce Senator Langford.
Well, I'll have an opportunity later to say a few more words, but I do want to say how much I appreciate the opportunity to introduce Senator Langford, who working with Jackie Rosen. I'm also a synagogue president in Jerusalem. I know how much she suffered through that. After that, the Senate is easy. But it is a true honor to be able to be together on this platform with somebody who's not only a close friend, but somebody the more you get to know him, the more you appreciate the breadth of his experience, his contributions, his importance to the Jewish people, to America, to New York City, New York State, Eric Gertler, and you'll hear much more about him very shortly. We also have here many diplomats from Kurdistan, from Bosnia-Herzegovina. The ambassador of China has joined us, and we thank him for being here, from Israel and from other countries who come as well to celebrate American Jewish heritage. I know everybody in this room deserves an introduction, but one particular I want to mention is Imam Mohammed Tawhidi, who is here from the Global Imam Council. And he is one of those who has spoken out since October 7th, and the members of the Imam Council for justice and right against the forces of evil, and we thank you for that. So the senator mentioned on ChatGPT, I put in and I said, what should I say about American Jewish Heritage Week? Well, it was started by President Bush in 2006. I said, it's a lie, it's not true, but it didn't answer me. But the truth is, in 1983, a woman named Judy Shapiro, who worked in the New York City public system and very active Jewish volunteer, came to me when I was head of the JCRC in New York and said there are heritage weeks for every ethnicity and every religious group except for the Jewish kids in the public school systems. And she is getting a tape of this. She is in a senior citizen home. She's well in her 90s. And I know how much she will appreciate being remembered, because she carried the burden for many, many years of Jewish Heritage Week, and we finally got it to the attention of President Reagan in 1985. And you might remember the controversy about his visit to Bitburg when Elie Wiesel made that famous speech, "That place is not your place, Mr. President." That was the Jewish Heritage Week commemoration at the White House, and launched what was a very successful program across the United States. Then it sort of dissipated in the interim years, and then President Bush in 2006 did resurrect, and the annual commemorations, thanks to the members of Congress and the Senate who have helped perpetuate it and make it a regular institution in American Jewish life, in American life. Jackie Rosen made a mention about the importance of history. For us, history in the Jewish tradition is not about the past, it's about the future. We look back in order to look forward. We look back to the American Jewish heritage to learn the lessons, to spare future generations the trial and tribulations of our mistakes, and to learn from our successes. So this is a unique approach. We don't have a Hebrew word for history. We have zechira, remembrance, which is a dynamic process where you have to understand what leads to things and what flows from them. Zechira is the central theme in all the commemorations of this period. Holocaust Memorial Day is symbolized in one word, zachor. Yom HaZikaron for those soldiers who fell in the defense of Israel and those who were the victims of terrorism. It's a central concept in Jewish life, and I think that is the motivation for the celebration of American Jewish Heritage Week in a year where you have seen a war against the Jewish people, against the Jewish nation, against Jewish history, and against the Jewish future. So this commemoration takes on even greater significance. One of those who has been most outspoken about anti-Semitism and leading this effort in the Senate together with Senator Rosen is Senator James Lankford, who has been in the Senate since 2015 and before that 2 terms in the House. And we are really grateful for that leadership that he has demonstrated. He is an ordained Southern Baptist minister, and maybe out of that tradition motivates your commitment in this regard, both for justice and to fight hatred and bigotry. He serves on the Committee on Finance, Committee on Homeland Security, and he is a ranking member of the Subcommittee on Government Operations and Vice Chair of the Select Committee on Ethics. And he has become one of the leading voices, and as I said, the bipartisan task force for combating anti-Semitism. There's so much more we could say about him and his leadership in the legislation to fight anti-Semitism. There are students amongst us here who are the true heroes who should be recognized because they're Jewish students on the front line of the battle every day in universities across this country, and we salute you. And these legislative efforts are there to protect you as well as future generations, both of students and now of faculty as well. So, Senator, we're deeply grateful to you for all that you have done and will do, and the podium is yours.
Thank you. Ezra, Malcolm, thank you very much. That's exceptionally kind of you. I'm going to make my comments brief. I see several of my colleagues that are still here as well that also want to be able to bid you greetings. Glad you're here. It's good to be able to get together and to be able to be together and to be able to celebrate heritage together. So I'm grateful that you're taking the time from wherever you're coming from all over this great country, or for several of you from around the world, to be able to recognize the significance of this time period, of this month, of this. That's important for us. It's important for this Capitol Hill to be able to see, but it's important for us to be able to engage as well together. It goes back a very long way. George Washington, as many of you know, had 2 favorite verses that he talked about often, and in many of his letters, he came back again and again to Psalm 34:18, the Lord is near to the brokenhearted, he saves those who are crushed in spirit. That was the most common verse that he wrote in every single letter. But the other verse that we sometimes lose track of is from Micah 4:4, which says, everyone will sit under their own vine and under their own fig tree, and no one will make them afraid. The Lord Almighty has spoken. That was the verse that George Washington wrote to the Hebrew synagogue in Newport, Rhode Island, when they wrote him and said, will Jews be welcome in this new country? He responded back to them with Micah 4:4. That it's still a legacy and a heritage that we have in the United States that we've got to continue to be able to maintain. For Jackie Rosen and I, when we started the Anti-Semitism Caucus and the conversation that we have begun in leaders around the world, with ambassadors around the world, with people in our own country, we continue to be able to raise this as an issue. She and I have talked often about what's happening on college campuses for the last several years, and quite frankly, we've had folks for several years say it's not that big a deal, it's not really happening, it's not really happening. Well, no one's saying that anymore, because we see what is happening on some of our university campuses. Not all, thankfully, but on some. And it will be up to many of us to be able to speak out on what is right and how we actually protect the rights of every single student and how we guard that right. So we've done that already. The House has passed the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act. We have multiple other bills that are actually moving right now to be able to have this national dialogue, to be able to say, what are we going to do about this? And please tell me it's not nothing. It's something. that we need to engage. That's both donors and parents and families making choices about what places that their kids are going to go so that they know that they're going to a place where everyone is welcome. It's administration in every single campus stepping up and saying, we're going to do whatever it takes to make sure we protect the integrity of every single student of our campus, that every single student is both welcomed and encouraged, that we can have dialogue and disagreements, but no one's going to shout a student down and not allow them to go to class. No one's going to intimidate them in the hallways. It's the United States of America. That should not be who we are. The world stage should not look at American universities and say that's what they believe, because that's not who we are. And we got to continue to be able to speak out on that frequently and often. A month ago, I spent a week in Israel. I have to tell you, I've traveled back and forth often. Many of you travel back and forth often in all likelihood as well, but it was very, very different to be able to be there in April than other times that I've been there. I was in Kibbutz Nir Oz, walking through the streets that are empty with John. John, who's lived there for decades, turned me around and he took me to his house. And I will never forget the moment standing in front of his house that has just bullet holes all over the front of it. Beautiful flowers that are blooming right outside, and him turning around and saying, that's my son's house. He's currently a hostage somewhere a mile from here in Gaza. It's a moment I'll never forget, because it's a clarifying moment in a million ways, that for some reason the world seems to forget the hostages that are still in Gaza, why there's still a war that's ongoing, and why this is so important that we talk about anti-Semitism in our country and around the world, and never allow that kind of hateful dialogue to be able to rise. Because right now, John is praying for his son in Gaza to come home because of anti-Semitism in his backyard. So for all of us, thank you for gathering. Thank you for continuing to pray. And we mean it when we say, we're a nation together. And we're going to live those principles and those values that are foundational to our nation and make sure that we spread those values worldwide, because the world needs to hear this kind of unity, and that we stand for the rights of all individuals and stand for the rights of Israel to be a Jewish nation and to be able to not just survive, but to thrive in the days ahead. God bless you.
Senator Ben Cardin is the senior senator from my home state of Maryland. He was first elected to the Senate in 2006. Prior to that, he served in the House of Representatives. He is a member of the Senate Bipartisan Task Force for Combating Anti-Semitism and co-sponsor of the Countering Anti-Semitism Act. Importantly for this group, Senator Cardin chairs the Committee on Foreign Relations. He has fought tirelessly on behalf of the American Jewish community, is a leading voice in combating anti-Semitism while strongly advancing Jewish values in everything he does. Senator Cardin will be retiring from the Senate at the end of this year. His advocacy as a senator on behalf of Jewish Americans and against anti-Semitism around the world will be missed, but I am certain that Ben Cardin will continue the fight as a private citizen. I could not be more proud than to introduce Senator Ben Cardin.
Greg, thank you very much. Thank you for your leadership. Thank you. I know we have Senator Brown here, and I think there's another senator here, and Senator Booker's here. And I want to make sure they have a chance to say hello. We have a second vote that's on the floor of the Senate as we speak, so I know we're all going to have to leave shortly. So I first want to thank you for bringing knishes into the United States Senate. If you know the food we have to eat here, this was the best food I've seen all year, so thank you for that. And Malcolm, thank you for bringing my Maryland constituents here. We appreciate that, all the people that are here from Maryland. I'm just going to, I heard Jackie Rosen and I heard James Langford, their comments about joining in bipartisan efforts to combat all forms of anti-Semitism and develop strategies in the United States Senate in this country. It is desperately needed. I thank both of them for their leadership. Next month, I will be in Europe with Rabbi Baker for a European seminar we're doing in regards to fighting anti-Semitism. So we need to do it in Europe. We need to do it here in America. And the lessons that we learned in the Berlin Conference are so relevant today. Any form of anti-Semitism we must speak out against. We cannot be silent. We cannot put it under the rug. We've got to speak out against any form of anti-Semitism. We've got to invest in education. We've got to invest in dialogue. And leaders need to lead, whether they're a United States Senator or whether they're a leader in our community, they must speak out against any form of anti-Semitism. These are the lessons that we've learned. The combating anti-Semitism legislation that Senator Rosen talked about reinforces the Biden administration's first strategy ever to fight anti-Semitism by making sure we have a point person in the administration to coordinate all the different agencies. We need to enact that law. And the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act is so desperately needed on our college campuses today. We see that all over, and we have to absolutely act to make sure that we protect our students on campus. So let's make sure we implement these strategies. And I'm going to say something about Malcolm. First of all, Eric, congratulations on being recognized during this incredibly important time during Jewish American Heritage Month. Well deserved. I congratulate you. But I'm going to talk a little bit about the person I'm going to give the award to, Malcolm Hoenlein. But before I do that, I want to make one comment. I could talk a long time about what's happening in the Middle East, etc. I just want to underscore how outrageous the ICC actions has been this week. We cannot be silent about that. To say any moral equivalency of what terrorist Hamas has done in Israel is just an affront to humanity. So I just really, and it makes it, by the way, our challenges a lot more difficult. So we have bipartisan groups working every day to make sure Israel has what it needs to defend itself, and that we do everything we can not only to defeat Hamas, but make sure there's lasting peace in the Middle East. And make sure those that are innocent bystanders get the help they need with humanitarian assistance and to get the hostages released. So we're working on that all the time, and we will continue to do that in as much as we can, bipartisan. Don't let anyone divide us in our support for Israel. Now, Malcolm Hoenlein, he's my hero because he has accomplished things that are much more difficult than being a United States Senator. He was president of the major Jewish organization. If you had to put up with 52 or 53 CEOs or executive directors of the major Jewish organizations in this country and work out their politics, that's a lot more difficult than what we have to do here in the United States Senate. But to make it, he got good training because he was the executive director of the Jewish Relations Council of New York. I can't think of a more difficult two positions that anyone has ever held. So mazel tov on all of that. But thank you for recognizing this giant of a person in our community, because when the history is told about the Jewish community and our heritage here in the United States, Malcolm Hoenlein is going to be a major part of that story for what he has done to represent the Jewish community, but to leave the legacy to the Jewish community's contributions here to our great country. So, Malcolm, congratulations. Well-deserved honor, and it's my pleasure to present this to you. Oh, you are here, Corey. You're quiet today.
Senator Brown.
Senator Brown, Eric, Greg. William. Rabbi Shin? Okay. One more.
Matt at the White House. Yeah. He was disappointed we didn't talk veganism like we used to. Perfect. Thank you, Senator. Could be a double.
Senator Sherrod Brown is the senior senator from my native state of Ohio. Prior to his election to the Senate in 2006, he represented Ohio's 13th congressional district in the House of Representatives. He serves as chair of the Senate's Committee on Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs. He works tirelessly on behalf of the American worker, stressing the dignity of work in the great tradition of generations of Jewish labor leaders. He played a key role in the creation of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau and successfully led the fight to make the Earned Income Tax Credit permanent. He joined with the late John Lewis to co-chair the congressional delegation to commemorate the 50th anniversary of the March for Voting Rights in Selma. Mindful of the importance of agriculture to Ohio's economy, he's the only Ohio senator in half a century to serve on the Senate Agriculture Committee, where he helped write the most recent Farm Bill. As I have learned, he is also a man of great patience, and I thank him for waiting, but it is my great pleasure to introduce my friend, Senator Sherrod Brown.
You're here.
Thank you, Greg. Good to be back for fifth or sixth or seventh year at least. So thank you for that. You ought to have a chair instead of having to sit on the floor. Okay. Anyway, thank you. And Eric, congratulations to you. Thank you. And I told him I've never sat next to somebody who has his picture on a candy bar. That's kind of, he said he's trying to impress his Jewish mother. So how do you do that? But thank you so much. Rabbi Gary Zola, my longtime friend, we met through Hebrew Union College, and Hebrew Union College, for people that may not know this history, was founded more than 140 years ago, at least 150 years ago, by Rabbi Weiss. It was the beginning of Reform Judaism, and it was in 1940 where Rabbi Heschel came from Warsaw to Berlin to Cincinnati for his first year in the New World. Then he went on to do what he did as an incredible person of God in New York City. Just a bit about, because you're sitting in one of the most beautiful, we were talking about this a moment ago, most beautiful rooms in the Capitol. This is the Kennedy Caucus Room. This is the room where the Titanic hearings were held. It was the room where the McCarthy hearings were held. It was the room where the Watergate hearings were held. It's the room where JFK announced for president. It's the room where RFK announced for president, in this beautiful room. So when I think about addressing this group every year, understanding how history is thrust on all of us, and some of us, I would say members of Congress, aren't so good at this, at understanding our history. And the Jewish community is certainly, probably more than almost anybody else in this country, understand the importance of history. That's what makes so troubling what's happening in the Middle East now, as you know. There is simply no place for anti-Semitism, no place for hate. I appreciate the speakers before me and all of you standing up against anti-Semitism and against racism and against hate. You put your faith into action, the world's a better place as a result. On a more positive note, 2 weeks ago I had the pleasure of going to the investiture, which is the installation of a new federal judge, the investiture in Columbus of Rachel Blumkatz. And I worked with the White House selecting her, 40 years old, brilliant mind, selecting her to be a Sixth Circuit district judge in Ohio, representing Ohio, Michigan, Kentucky, and Tennessee. Thank you. And she, in her installation, the night before the installation, she had a party of sorts, a celebration at her local temple on the east side of Columbus. And she talked a lot about her faith, talked a lot about Tikkun Olam. And that's particularly meaningful to me because my mother was so involved with the YWCA, whose mission is to eliminate racism and to empower women. Tikkun Olam is obviously the center of faith for her and many of you in this room. She's part of that proud tradition. She is a 40-year-old, 41-now-year-old judge who I have higher designs for her at some point in her career, but we will see. Last thing I wanted to mention is many of you are familiar, I think probably all of you are familiar with the letter from the Birmingham jail, and you probably read it in high school. It's worth reading again. Every year in Senator the senator from Oklahoma has joined me on the floor to read this letter. We bring a bipartisan group of senators together. He sent a letter, Dr. King was sending a response to the white Christian ministers, the quote-unquote moderate ministers in Birmingham who were resisting voting rights, saying, be patient and we will get you voting rights. And Dr. King said in the middle of his letter from Birmingham jail, he said, human progress never rolls in on wheels of inevitability. Human progress never rolls on the wheels of inevitability. It really charges all of us for activism. I mean, you've joined at Greg's and others' invitation to be here because you care, because you're activists, because you want to make a better world. Thank you for letting me be part of this.
Senator Cory Booker is the junior senator from New Jersey. Prior to his election to the Senate, he served as the mayor of Newark. Senator Booker played varsity football at Stanford, where he was an all Pac-10 academic team. I don't think any other senator can make that claim. At Yale Law School, he co-founded what is now called Shabtai, a global Jewish leadership society, where he has been described as facilitating the kinds of conversations around the Shabbat table that bring together secular and sectarian, poor and rich, Muslim and Jew, student and scholar, Mormon and pagan, and jock and genius. When he moved to Newark after law school, he started a nonprofit to provide legal services to low-income families. He's the leading national figure in the effort to fix our broken criminal justice system. Senator Booker is a member of the Senate Bipartisan Task Force for Combating Anti-Semitism and a co-founder and co-chair of the Bipartisan Abraham Accords Caucus. He is a co-sponsor of the Countering Anti-Semitism Act. No stranger to this room, please welcome Senator Cory Booker.
All right, so I am a warm-up act for the great senior senator from Oregon, Ron Wyden. I want to be very quickly. I'm blown away that I have such great relationships with so many people on the dais, from Rabbi Margareta, and I saw Rabbi Shemtov. I just want to focus in on two people really quick. First, Eric, who reminded me that we have been meeting each other over the years. We've danced together at weddings. He introduced me at a Young Presidents Association Act. But the most powerful thing I can say to him as he's sitting here being honored and recognized, the most important thing he wanted to talk to me about was maybe now my mother will be proud of me and I can give her some nachas for being honored at this great organization. And I appreciate that because I too, I don't have a Jewish mother, but I have a mother that says behind every successful child is an astonished parent. So I hear you on trying to give your mother nachas. I also want to say to Malcolm, I was brought to see Malcolm. I've known Malcolm since I had hair. And that was a long time ago when I was brought to see him when I had a lush afro. But the fact that when I was a student, I was brought to see him where he was heralded to me as one of the most important global Jewish leaders whose name we don't know. And I saw his humility, I saw his strength of leadership, I saw his compassion and care for this big black goy from Jersey. But most of all, he remained in my life as a guiding light, an example of what real leadership is about. Not having people give you awe because of your great leadership, but empowering other people to lead. And I just want to give you a round of applause, Malcolm, for years of friendship. All right, so I come to you very briefly before the main act of Ron Wyden comes. I come very briefly to tell you that you cannot talk about Jewish heritage. There's so much to brag about. Jews in America, from the labor movement to the arts, the sciences, has made indelible impacts on the course of this great nation. We are America because of Jewish Americans and the extraordinary impact. But for me to stand here as the fourth black person ever popularly elected to the United States Senate, I have to mention that part of Jewish heritage is the extraordinary impact Jews have made on the journey of black Americans in this country. A Jewish man on a couch in 1965 being so troubled by watching the Edmund Pettus Bridge where Alabama state troopers beat marchers, one of them, my hero, my former colleague, the great John Lewis. This Jewish man in New Jersey said, I've got to do something about this. I can't afford a plane ticket down to Alabama. I can't close my business, so I'll just do what I can right here, right now, because that is a quintessential Jewish value. When there is something going on in the world, as a great rabbi said, do not be overwhelmed by the enormity of the world's grief. Do justice now. Yours is not to solve all the problems, but not to abandon them either. He started volunteering with the Fair Housing Council. Years later, he gets a case file of a black family trying to move into New Jersey in the wealthy suburbs where there was great public schools but being denied housing. They set up white test couples after they were turned away from housing. The white couple found out the house they were told was sold was still for sale. Papers were drawn up for the white family. On the day of the closing, the white family didn't show up. The black man from the black family and this extraordinary Jewish lawyer named Marty Friedman and confronted the real estate agent. Real estate agent realizes he was caught in discrimination, stands up and punches Marty Friedman in the face and sings a Doberman Pinscher on the black man. A fight breaks out. They get out of there scathed and scarred, but they put legal letters back and forth. The family that owned the house was so embarrassed by what was going on, they agreed to sell the house directly to the black family. The black family moved in 1969, first black family to integrate this large section of New Jersey up in Bergen County. And then 43 years later, the baby from the black family was elected as the fourth black person ever in United States history as a United States Senator. It may seem almost irrational that we live in this country where Jewish people have had so many pressing issues and concerns. But the Jewish community has always realized this truth. If I am not for myself, who will be for me? But if I am only for myself, what am I? My parents taught me that the civil rights movement is replete with examples of blacks and Jews standing together, marching together, bleeding together, and like Goodman, Cheney, and Schwerner, dying together. I gave a tour of someone to my city this past weekend, and I went to one of my favorite places in the world. It is this unbelievable spot of a synagogue that sits at the intersection, a former synagogue that sits at the intersection of Martin Luther King Boulevard and Muhammad Ali Street, a street intersection named for a Christian pastor and a Muslim man right in the shadow of a former synagogue. Well, the rabbi of that former synagogue was one of the 5 people that spoke on the March on Washington. His name was Rabbi Joachim Prince. He was a man that was banished from Germany when they were still banishing Jews before they started killing them, and came to the United States to raise money for his cause. He traveled all over the country, but when he saw the conditions of black people in the South, he could not remain silent. And he became one of the loudest, proudest voices for civil rights and equality in America, heralded by civil rights leaders and given the honor of speaking right before Martin Luther King on the March in Washington, and not the greatest speaking order there was. But I want to end by telling you what he said and why it challenges me now at a time of rising anti-Semitism, why it challenges me now by what's happening on college campuses, challenges me now when you see global institutions like the United Nations or the ICC showing obvious hypocrisy and anti-Semitic bias. Because he said the problem really is and always will be not the hate of the world, not the violence of the world, but good people who are indifferent to it. I stand here on a legacy of blacks and Jews sacrificing to make our nation live up to her promise that we should be a nation of not liberty and justice for some, but liberty and justice for all. That is our legacy. That is our struggle. And now more than ever, the Jewish community, which has fought for the labor rights, has fought for equal rights, has fought for so many other communities, I stand here today that I remember, I will not forget. I stand up for Jewish rights. I stand up for equality. I stand against anti-Semitism. I will repay my ancestors, and I believe that the great heritage of Jews in America has only just begun. In B'ezrat Hashem, the best days are still ahead of us. Thank you.
Now you understand why Greg Rosenbaum is the best MC in the world. He wants me now to follow that speech. But it is my pleasure to introduce Senator Ron Wyden, the senior senator from Oregon. Prior to his election to the Senate, he served in the House of Representatives. Senator Wyden grew up as the son of Jewish parents who fled Nazi Germany. He was awarded a basketball scholarship by the University of California, Santa Barbara, before transferring to Stanford, where he received his degree. Senator Wyden's interest in public service was piqued when he taught at several Oregon universities. He acted on his concern for the elderly by forming the Oregon chapter of the Grey Panthers and directing the Oregon Legal Services for the Elderly, all in keeping with traditional Jewish teachings to honor your elders. Senator Wyden is probably the senator that most affects your daily life and livelihood. He chairs the Senate Finance Committee and is vice chair of the Joint Committee on Taxation. In those roles, he is a principal in setting the nation's tax policies and its spending priorities. He also serves on the Energy and Natural Resources and Budget Committees and is currently serving on the Select Committee on Intelligence. He is also a co-sponsor of the Countering Anti-Semitism Act. It is my great pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Senator Ron Wyden.
Thank you very much. I don't know how many of you saw the little discussion between a couple of Jewish guys, Senator Schatz and I, after Senator Booker was done and saw that phenomenal reception. Senator Schatz looked at me and said, "Okay, you go next." I'm barely a household word in my own household, let alone in America. But I will tell you, I was the minion maker in the United States Senate, and something I'm very, very proud of. And I understand that today you honored my friend Malcolm. Where is Malcolm? Oh, there's my buddy. I will tell you, getting elected to the United States Senate was a special privilege, and one of the things that I saw first was Malcolm and the late Abraham Wolfson in action in New York. How many of you are from New York? Not too many New Yorkers.
How many are from New York? There we go.
They took me around the community in Brooklyn, and I said, "Malcolm, there are more Jews on one block in Brooklyn than there are in my state." So this was a wonderful introduction to the community. And I'm going to spare you the filibuster. I know we want to hear from Senator Schatz. I almost didn't make it here this morning. And I am not talking about the train being late or the shuttle not working. I almost wasn't born. My parents fled the Nazis in the 30s. Not all got out. We lost family at Kristallnacht and Theresienstadt. And my dad, who fled Germany at 13, basically talked his way into the army and was one of the famous Ritchie boys. I don't know if you've heard of them. They were the Jewish kids who basically fled Germany and wrote the propaganda pamphlets for our army, basically telling the Nazis everything was hopeless and they ought to give up. So these are my roots. And this is an extraordinary time in America because we know that hate is on the rise. And if you look at my Twitter feed, and I'm sure it's the same way for Senator Schatz, and people say you're, dual national and your loyalties aren't, to the United States. I always tell people the first thing that's important about our heritage is Jewish values are American values. That is a fundamental part of American life. And I've got a book coming out here shortly, and it's about chutzpah and using chutzpah for doing good. Because as you know, there's a lot of rabbinical literature. Malcolm would know more about this than I. But chutzpah can also be used for bad. And one of the things I like so much about coming here and being with Malcolm and being part of the good works he's doing in the community and perfecting the world is that I believe good chutzpah is going to win. Good chutzpah is America at its best. From the time that our founding fathers told the Brits to fly a kite, and throughout our tradition, good chutzpah has managed to prevail. And at a time when we are thinking about our heritage, we are seeing the newspaper headlines daily about the challenge with respect to the Middle East. What Senator Schatz and Senator Booker and I are all about is getting the hostages out, getting humanitarian aid in, and coming up with a solution that brings the region together. That's what we're all about. That's our heritage at its best. And one of the first rules in the Senate is friends do not filibuster friends. And that's why I'm going to, in the parlance of the Senate, yield to my friend from Hawaii and tell you that I think right now what you're doing to talk about our roots, to talk about good chutzpah, and the work Malcolm Hoenlein does every day is some of the most important work that our community leaders can do. For that, I say God bless, Godspeed, look forward to working with all of you.
Senator Schatz was going to get up and speak right away, but I want to do a little quiz. There are only 2 states in the United States that have both a Jewish governor and a Jewish senator. And they're not New York, New Jersey, Florida, or California. They are Colorado and Hawaii. It is a pleasure to have Senator Brian Schatz, the senior senator from Hawaii, another of my home states, one of 9 Jewish senators, join us today. I could say a lot about Senator Schatz, but he's eager to speak, and so I want to welcome him back to this celebration of Jewish American heritage, Senator Brian Schatz.
Good afternoon, everybody. It really is an honor to be here with all of you as we celebrate Jewish American Heritage Month, and I want to especially congratulate today's honorees, Malcolm Hoenlein and Eric Gertler, on their well-deserved recognition for their contributions. Of course, this year's gathering is not like previous years. In the wake of the worst attack on Jews since the Holocaust, people mourn the loss of family and friends. Others are languishing, wondering if and when their mothers and brothers and neighbors being held hostage will come home again. And here at home and around the world, Jews are watching the rise of anti-Semitism, the hardening of rhetoric, and the flattening of the debate. We are understandably in pain and on edge. So this year is different, but what is also true is that Jewishness and Jewish heritage are not questions primarily of foreign policy. They're not questions of politics or geopolitics, left or right. What makes us Jews, what binds us all in this room together, is our shared values. I was lucky enough to grow up in a home where my parents embodied values like tikkun olam. and instilled in my brothers and me a powerful idea that everybody has an obligation to try to improve things around them in whatever way is possible. Where do you start? Wherever you are. What do you use? Whatever you have. 8 years before I was born in 1965, my dad, Dr. Irv Schatz, for some of you, Itzy Schatz, read an article in a medical journal that stopped him in his tracks. It was about a study which later came to be known as the infamous Tuskegee experiment, in which researchers deliberately withheld treatment for poor black sharecroppers with late-stage syphilis. My dad was outraged. How could these scientists abandon the first principle, to do no harm? And so he wrote to them, the United States Public Health Service, becoming one of the first people in the country to speak out against this injustice. And it was not without risk. He was a junior doctor, just a few years out of medical school, and the consequences could have been severe. But he did it anyway, because he felt a duty to do so. Of course, there have been so many extraordinary Jewish leaders over the years who've demonstrated those values and bettered their communities and their countries in ways big and small, seen and unseen, because of it. This month is a chance to celebrate them, to reflect on our contributions, and recommit ourselves to doing our part. And perhaps because, rather than in spite of all the ongoing unrest and division, remembering our purpose and striving to make the world a little bit better is that much more important. Thank you very much for this honor.
Our next speaker has made the long trek all the way across the Capitol to join us. Representative Brad Schneider represents Illinois' 10th Congressional District, a district that has the highest Jewish population of any district outside New York, Florida, and California, at almost 11% Jewish. Representative Schneider has become one of the leading voices in the House on Jewish issues and matters of concern to the Jewish community. He's a recognized leader on the Middle East, and in particular, the U.S.-Israel relationship. He is constantly seeking bipartisan solutions to the nation's biggest problems as a member of the Problem Solvers Caucus and vice chair of the New Democratic Coalition. We welcome Representative Brad Schneider.
Good afternoon. It's a privilege to be here. You learn new things every day. Greg, thank you for the kind words. I did not realize that my district had grown with the new lines to 11% Jewish. We were 10 before and ranked number 6, so we're moving up in the world. I come from a state with a Jewish governor. I grew up in Colorado with a Jewish governor and Senator Schatz left, but I've been to Hawaii as a Jewish governor, so I don't know what that creates. But it's a privilege to be here celebrating Jewish American Heritage Month. And I don't have prepared remarks, but I want to dwell a little bit on the idea of Jewish and American and heritage. We are at a moment in our history where we're seeing anti-Semitism rise all across the country, across the world. We're seeing it on our campuses. We're seeing it in our city council meetings. And people are questioning our presence here. I don't know if any of you have had anyone say to you, go back to where you came from. Go back to Poland, go back to wherever. And we've had the challenge of saying, you know, our people, our heritage has 3,500 years of consecutive presence in the land of Israel. And I'm very proud of that, and I talk about that and I celebrate that. But my people, my story is here in the United States. I proudly serve as a representative of the United States Congress, equal in every respect of the way with every one of my colleagues, regardless of their story, regardless of their state, regardless of the path that they took to come to this place. And my Jewish colleagues, it is the same. We walk through the halls of this Congress with our heads held high, knowing our responsibilities and our duties to the people we represent, and serving in every aspect and every level of responsibility. And I'm proud of that. And that's what we celebrate in Jewish American Heritage Month, which we wouldn't have, by the way. I saw Debbie come in. Oh, there she is. If not for the leadership of my dear friend, Debbie Wasserman Schultz. People are challenging us. We must not let them win. No one can make us feel inferior without our consent, to quote Eleanor Roosevelt. For us, it's a matter of saying we are proud to be American. We are proud of the history that goes back to the very first days of our nation and touches every single chapter of our heritage in this country. And we are proud of the bonds we have with our fellow citizens and the bonds our nation has with the Jewish state. This is a remarkable time that I don't think any of us expected to be in at this moment. But all of us have been called to this moment and are answering the call. You by being here, us by being sent here by all of you. And so yes, I do represent a district that I guess now has 11% Jewish population. But we have a large Muslim population, I have a large Asian population, I have a large Latino population. I represent all of those people, and I'm proud to do it. And I do it with a Jewish lens. Talked about my story. Two of my grandparents were born in Colorado, but my mother's mother was born in somewhere around Kiev, and came here, slightly different story, but came here not as Senator Schatz talked about in the Holocaust. My family came, my grandmother came after the pogroms in the early 1900s. The interesting part of her story is somehow they ended up in England or were supposed to be on the Titanic, but my uncle got sick. So I might not be here if not for that. But all of us wouldn't be here without the twists of fate and the hand of God. But I am here, and I'm proud to be here. And I know that as I do my job, as we do our jobs, I reflect on the lessons and the values I inherited and learned from my parents and my grandparents before them. And I am proud that they instilled in me my Jewish American heritage, and I am very proud to celebrate Jewish American Heritage Month here in the halls of Congress. There's nowhere I would rather be. So congratulations to my dear friend Malcolm Hoenlein, to Eric Gertler. Greg, thank you for your kind words. We are in an extraordinary moment, but we are rising to the moment, and these will be extraordinary times for the benefit of our people and our nation. God bless you.
Our next speaker actually doesn't need an introduction to any event related to Jewish American Heritage Month, because without her, there would be no Jewish American Heritage Month. Debbie Wasserman Schultz, as her first act in Congress, proposed the resolution which created Jewish American Heritage Month in conjunction with another resolution in the Senate with Senator Arlen Specter as its sponsor. And every year since the passage of that resolution, the President of the United States has declared May as Jewish American Heritage Month. Representative Wasserman Schultz is simply unstoppable. She fulfills her legislative responsibilities, including service on the Appropriations Committee, where she's the ranking member on the Subcommittee on Military Construction, Veterans Affairs, and related agencies, and she was selected to serve on the Select Subcommittee on the Weaponization of Government. She's a member of both the House Abraham Accords Caucus and the Bipartisan Task Force for Combating Anti-Semitism. But most importantly, Representative Wasserman Schultz's energy and enthusiasm is the reason we celebrate Jewish American Heritage Month this year for the 19th time. It is a personal privilege to work with her on this critical priority. Representative Debbie Wasserman Schultz.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I really want to thank each and every one of you for taking the time to be here to celebrate the 19th commemoration of Jewish American Heritage Month. I think probably each of us here in this room cannot think of a more critical time in which to make sure that we spend at least a month acknowledging and celebrating and educating about the contributions that Jews have made to the success of the United States of America for literally hundreds of years now. And so it is so incredibly important that we make sure that we shine a spotlight, and we have an opportunity to do that now each May. Congratulations to my friend Malcolm and Eric as well. What's always wonderful about this celebration is that it celebrates others and ensures that we can uplift the Jewish leaders who do so much to help make sure that we show how our community lives our values through Tikkun Olam, through acts of tzedakah, through Gemilut Hasadim, acts of loving kindness. It is so incredibly important that we make sure that we spend this time educating not just Jews, but non-Jews especially, about the significance of the fabric that Jewish leaders across the country and across the spectrum have helped to weave in the rich tapestry that is the United States. Now, along with being grateful to stand by your side, I hope that Brad and I have proved how devoted we are to celebrating this month, because we had to schlep to the Senate side, which is no easy feat. I was about to send out a search party to find me in the internecine tunnels in which I inevitably get lost, even though this is my 10th term in Congress. Tim, I don't know how you do it. Maybe you get lost on the House side too, but perhaps we could have this celebration on the House side on the 20th anniversary of the celebration of Jewish American Heritage Month. Just saying. So this is an annual commemoration that is so critical. It helps us pay tribute to the generations of Jewish Americans, as I said, who helped shape the rich tapestry of history, culture, and society. And it is important because we are less than 2% of our population. It is so important that you understand that so many of our colleagues in the House and the Senate, often the first time that they arrive to Congress is the first time that they are really having an opportunity to interact with any Jews. That from so many districts, especially in the House of Representatives, so many of our colleagues represent hardly any, if any, Jewish people. Certainly, there not being enough of a community and a society for them to understand that we're not just a religion, we're a rich culture and heritage, and that we have a value set by which we live that has helped make sure that we can help make not just the United States, but the world a better place. And so that's why it was so important in 2005 when the Greater Miami Jewish Federation and the Jewish Museum Leadership of Florida came, yes, go Greater Miami Federation, came to me and asked me to lead the sponsorship of the first Jewish American Heritage Month resolution. And I will tell you, it was, even though I was a freshman in the minority, it was one of the quickest passages of a resolution like this, of legislation like this, particularly for a freshman in the minority. I'll tell you, ask me off to the side one day for the backstory on how we actually got it done. A lot of the people here, including William, know that it was, the sausage gets made. Let's just put it that way. I shouldn't be talking about sausage. Right, the kosher sausage got made that day. But there is a backstory. But it is important because when we have events in our communities, when we bring people of all backgrounds and the kind of diversity that we need to bring together to celebrate Jewish American Heritage Month, we're able to educate people to reduce anti-Semitism and bigotry. And I want to ask you all for a favor. I, years ago now, have banned the word tolerance as it applies to our community or any community, because who wants to be tolerated? We don't want to be tolerated, we want it to be celebrated. We want to come together and have communities understand that we matter, that we've made a difference, and understand how they can interact and develop relationships across cultures so that we can make sure we can reduce hatred. So we have to do more to show our support and uplift the Jewish American community. And one of the most effective ways that we can combat anti-Semitism is through education and awareness, and that's what JAM is all about. I'm so proud of President Biden's national strategy to counter anti-Semitism. It's the United States' first ever strategy. It calls on all aspects of society to commemorate JAM specifically and use it as a tool to fight hate. It is a whole of government approach which is so necessary. We can see it in ADL's statistics, in American Jewish Committee's statistics. Anti-Semitism is rampantly on the rise, and we need to make sure that we comprehensively, in an organized way, do everything we can to combat it. And we need to make sure that we lift up some of the lesser-known Jews who have made a difference in the United States. I'll give you two lesser-known examples. Vera Rubin, who blazed a trail in astronomy and whose work helped establish the existence of dark matter. Vera Rubin, Jewish. Or Lillian D. Wald, a nurse who fought for public health care, women's and children's rights, and who founded the Henry Street Settlement. We have even better-known figures like Jonas Salk, a virologist who developed the polio vaccine, or Albert Einstein, of course, whose work in mathematics and physics still impact cutting-edge science. It is likely that many Americans may not be aware of each of these unique and incredible individuals' Jewish heritage. That's why events like this one in the United States Capitol, in the Temple of Democracy, are so important. And I'm thankful to Greg and to the Jewish American Heritage Coalition and to Ezra Friedlander for making sure that this celebration happens here in the Capitol every single year. My hope this year is that JAM is as widely celebrated as all the other heritage months that honor and celebrate the wonderful diversity of our community, and that we celebrate the diversity of the Jewish community. Because the perception of our community, and you have only to look around this room to see that we have diversity in our community here as well. America would not be what it is today or what it someday can be without such a rich mosaic of people. No other nation has that, and all of you can help by making sure that we sponsor community events, post the accomplishments of Jewish Americans on social media, uplift Jewish voices, not just in May, but year-round. And to the honorees, my colleagues in the House and Senate, and everyone else in this room, as the mother, the Jewish mother of Jewish American Heritage Month, I'm very proud to join you, and thank you so much. Happy JAM. That was the Jewish Heritage Week. Now we have a whole lot. No, thank you very much. Thank you.
Tim Kaine is the junior senator from Virginia. Prior to serving in the Senate, Senator Kaine was a Richmond City Councilor, Mayor of Richmond, Lieutenant Governor of Virginia, and Governor of Virginia. In 2016, Senator Kaine was the Democratic candidate for Vice President of the United States. During law school at Harvard, Senator Kaine took a year off to assist Jesuit missionaries in Honduras run a school to train teenagers to become carpenters and welders, an experience which led to his lifelong commitment to advancing job opportunities for everyone. Senator Kaine serves on both the Foreign Relations and Armed Services Committee, a powerful combination. He is a member of the Bipartisan Task Force for Combating Anti-Semitism and a co-sponsor of the Countering Anti-Semitism Act. He is a man of great faith, which drives his determination to serve the public. Senator Tim Kaine.
Well, good afternoon. What a good group. And I want to thank Greg for his kind words, and all of you. Welcome to the Senate. It is something when the House guys schlep all the way over here. I had to schlep precisely one flight of stairs from my office directly beneath the Kennedy caucus room, but we're always thrilled to welcome you here for Heritage Month in May. I want to acknowledge the colleagues who came before me, Brad and Debbie and Brian, such great members of the legislature, the House and the Senate. And I'll just share with you for a few minutes. I live in Richmond. Richmond is a city with a very historic and longstanding Jewish community. In fact, when Richmond became a city, very soon after it became a city and there was a city council, there were Jewish members of the Richmond City Council going back into the 1780s. The city became a state capital because Thomas Jefferson decided the Redcoats were too close to Williamsburg and so moved the state capital to Richmond. And from our early days as a city, we have been a city with a very strong and prominent Jewish community. As my colleagues have said, this feels very, very different than being here last year. I try to come every year, and each year there's a theme, and each year we recognize two great leaders. In this case, we're so glad to have Eric and Malcolm and acknowledge their many contributions to the Jewish community, but obviously to the broader American community. But it does feel different for the reason that was described. My worry about anti-Semitism in Virginia and elsewhere led me to take the floor of the Senate on January 16 of this year to give a speech about anti-Semitism. Some of you know that January 16 is International Religious Freedom Day, and it was designated as International Religious Freedom Day in the United States more than 30 years ago. Why January 16? January 16 was the day in 1786 when the Virginia General Assembly in downtown Richmond, just a few blocks from where I live, passed the Virginia Statute of Religious Freedom that became the basis of the First Amendment to the Constitution, guaranteeing that all should be able to worship or not as they see fit without being preferred or punished for the choice that they make. And that fundamental first freedom, we have a museum in Richmond that we call the Museum of America's First Freedom. And if you've never visited, I would encourage you to, because it will remind us all of the really historic gift we gave to the world in the First Amendment to the Constitution. I want the United States to be the safest, most welcoming, and friendliest place in the world for any Jew, for any Catholic, for any Muslim. But I've got to admit, if that's my goal, we're falling short of it. We're falling short of it with respect to Jews right now, and we have to do better. I want to read something. Debbie Wasserman Schultz did not steal my line, but she set me up extremely well when she said that she does not like to use the word tolerance. Let me read an amazing letter that many of you might know, but if you don't, I would encourage you to read the whole thing. In the aftermath of passing the Statute of Religious Freedom in Virginia, the legislator who made it happen was James Madison. The drafter of the statute was Thomas Jefferson, but he was an ambassador to France, and James Madison got it through the Virginia General Assembly. And by a great fluke of timing, within a year, James Madison was asked to draft the Bill of Rights. And he used the Statute of Religious Freedom to draft the Bill of Rights. Soon after, George Washington, a Virginian, became the first president of the United States after the drafting of the Constitution in 1787, a Jewish congregation in Newport, Rhode Island, wrote him a letter to congratulate him, but frankly also to kind of probe him a little bit to see how welcoming this new nation would be to Jews. And so it was a letter of congratulations, but also an effort to build a bridge with this first president. And George Washington wrote a letter back to this congregation, and let me read it to you, mindful of the setup that Debbie Wasserman Schultz gave me. This is a letter from August of 1790. All possess alike liberty of conscience and immunities of citizenship. It is now no more that toleration is spoken of, as if it was by the indulgence of one class of people that another enjoyed the exercise of their inherent natural rights. For happily, the government of the United States, which gives bigotry no sanction, to persecution no assistance, requires only that they who live under its protection should demean themselves as good citizens. Washington concluded the letter with this beautiful phrase: "May the children of the stock of Abraham who dwell in this land continue to merit and enjoy the goodwill of other inhabitants, while everyone shall sit in safety under his own vine and fig tree, and there shall be none to make him afraid." I read those words on the floor of the Senate on January 16 to remind us of our roots. The battle for religious freedom, not just for toleration, but the battle for religious freedom is something we've been proud of since 1787, and we have to return to that. And I told the story of a friend of mine in Boston who has been telling his family to remove mezuzahs from their doors so that they won't be targeted. My friend Andy, who told me that, made me think about it. I did a little bit of research, and I found that this is a thing, that people are targeted for mezuzahs on their doors, on college campuses, in neighborhoods. A few years ago, an enterprising group of students at the University of Indiana came up with a solution when students were being targeted. They handed out mezuzahs to people all over campus, and many put mezuzahs on their own doors to demonstrate solidarity with the Jewish community. And so I wondered, well, how do I buy a mezuzah? I'm a Catholic guy. I mean, I've never thought about this before, but I found a mezuzah online, of course. Amazon delivered it to my house very quickly, and I put it on the door to my house in Richmond. I didn't put the scroll in it because I feel like that's a religious tradition that would be wrong to appropriate as a Catholic. But what I put in it, I put something in it. Instead of the scroll, what I put in it is, "None shall be afraid." I just wrote that on a piece of paper, and I put that in the mezuzah on my door. This is a time when we just have to, thank you. This is a time when we just have to recommit to what we said about ourselves in 1787. You know, this is a battle that's been going on for millennia, and it has spikes, and it retracts, and yet it never goes away. We just have to recommit to it, and it takes all, and I'm so happy that you allowed a Catholic senator to make a brief shot to come visit you today. And even if you move it to the house, I'm still coming back next year. Thank you so very much, and have a great day.
We do have a couple of other legislative speakers to come, but I wanted to take a moment to recognize the members of the Diplomatic Corps who have joined us today. I wanted to point out that we are in the presence of the Ambassador of Lithuania and the Political Counselor of the Kingdom of Morocco, among many others whose names, unfortunately, I can't pronounce and I don't have in front of me. The Imam has already been recognized. We have an assortment of people at the head table who have been mentioned, and I thank all of them for being here. At this point, I would like to ask Honoree Eric Gertler to address us and give us some words of wisdom on the celebration of his honor. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We ask everyone to please find your seats.
Thank you, Ezra, and thank you, Greg. Senators, representatives, and esteemed guests, I want to thank you all for making time today for this very important luncheon. I'm truly grateful for this honor, and I feel so blessed to be here on Capitol Hill to celebrate Jewish American Heritage Month. It's that much more special because I get to share the dais and this honor with Malcolm Hoenlein, who's been a pillar of the Jewish community for decades, one of the most decent people I know, someone I get to call a friend, someone who is a mentor, and someone for whom all of eternity I will have shared a chocolate bar cover with. So. This honor, this year, brings with it even more meaning. And this convening, this celebration of Jewish American heritage brings with it even more urgency. Jewish American Heritage Month was created to help inform the American people of the many contributions of American Jews in American life. This is especially important in the aftermath of the horrific attacks of October 7th and the war that continues, and as we witness the increasing rise of anti-Semitism surrounding us. We must continue to raise awareness, to deepen understanding, and to build mutual respect. But we must also stand up for our faith, our values, and our identity. The anti-Semitism we are witnessing is extremely distressing, and I must say, also deeply painful. I pray for both a peaceful resolution and a future that is filled with much less hate. I especially want to acknowledge the senators and representatives who came here today to show their continued support for American Jewry and for Israel. The Jewish people have made significant contributions to American life in so many ways, and the United States and Israel have always had a special relationship strengthened by its shared democratic values. Friends support friends, especially during the most difficult times, so I thank you for your friendship. Like many Americans, I am an immigrant. I'm a Jewish Canadian by birth and a Jewish American by choice. My grandparents were immigrants too. Both my maternal and paternal grandparents left Europe before the pogroms. In fact, one of my grandmothers emigrated twice. She immigrated alone and then went back to get my grandfather for a second time. Now that's a very strong and courageous woman. My other grandmother came through Ellis Island and took a short ride to Philadelphia and then a long train ride to Saskatoon, Saskatchewan in Western Canada, and the rest is, shall we say, Canadian history. My personal immigration journey to America doesn't even come close to the miles traveled by my grandmothers, but had my grandmother stayed in Philadelphia, it would have made my immigration experience that much easier. But my journey was memorable too. I was sworn in as an American citizen with the first group of immigrants to be naturalized in New York City after the attacks of 9/11. We were in a courthouse in downtown New York that had to be surrounded by soldiers to protect the courthouse in those intense days after 9/11. Quite an entrance in order to take the oath of allegiance to this country. But those attacks, much like the attacks on October 7th, upended our world and deepened our resolve. For me, the attacks of 9/11 strengthened my desire to want to be an American citizen. I wanted to be part of a nation where opportunity, freedom, and democracy prevailed, and where anything is possible. It was the country where I wanted to leave my mark. It was the place where I wanted to take all the Jewish values and ideals I'd learned as a child and put them to practice to the better of this country. And the public service I have undertaken has been the greatest privilege of my life. I am humbled by the opportunities I've had in this country to make a difference, to serve my community, and to represent the ideals of my faith. My Jewish identity is my identity. My home is America. My nationality is American, and I'm also proud to be a Jewish American. Thank you so much.
Senator John Hickenlooper is the junior senator from Colorado, serving his first term in the Senate. Prior to that, he served as both mayor of Denver and governor of the state. His path to the Senate may seem ordinary, but his path to public service in the first place was anything but. He started his career as a geologist, then took a chance and opened Colorado's first brew pub. Craft brewing remains a hobby of his. Senator Hickenlooper is a member of the Bipartisan Task Force for Combating Anti-Semitism. He plays the banjo for fun, always has a dog at his side, and is a big baseball fan. Senator Hickenlooper has joined this celebration every year he has been in the Senate, and we are honored to welcome Senator Hickenlooper back to the Jewish Heritage Celebration on Capitol Hill. Senator John Hickenlooper.
Greg always gives me such a warm introduction that I worry that I will never be able to live up to it. But that aspiration is something I hope we all share. I want to give congratulations to both Malcolm Hoenlein and Eric Gertler. Their accomplishments and their commitment and who they are as people deserves the recognition they get today. Obviously, this has been a particularly challenging year. My heart, my wife's heart, our family are with you and with every Jew in Colorado, across the United States, around the world. We've seen levels of anti-Semitism and hate that I can't ever remember in my life seeing. It's a painful reminder of what lingers in the shadowy edges of society. It's also a reminder for all of us who aren't Jewish to stand up and push back on hate, to protect our Jewish friends and neighbors. When I first started my brew pub and joined the board of the Convention Visitors Bureau, 40 people on the board, the first 3 people that came up and welcomed me, and they didn't know me, a guy named Ken Gart, a guy named Eddie Robinson. He owned the dairy. Ken Gart owned Gart Sports. And then Barry Hirschfeld, who was a printer. And they were the first 3 people in the first meeting that came up and are to this day among my closest friends, and they were the 3 Jews on that committee. And I think it says a lot about the history of the Jewish community reaching out to the outsider, the person who's on the margins, who's at risk. I think it's a lot of what you're celebrating today and honoring that perseverance and community, the successes of the Jewish community in so many different ways. The Jewish American Heritage Month is a time to celebrate these accomplishments and again provide the platform for future success. In Colorado and across America, as I say, Jewish Americans are the leaders and the fighters for justice, for an equitable world, just living the values of your faith. In Colorado, Frances Weisbart Jacobs was one Jewish American. She impacted millions in Colorado and in the United States. She moved to Denver in 1874. She quickly became known as Colorado's Mother of Charity. She helped look at the numbers of disenfranchised people, many of them suffering from respiratory illnesses like TB, tuberculosis. And she helped found the National Jewish Hospital to aid anyone stricken with TB. My wife, Robin, who could not be here today, but she serves on the board of National Jewish to this day. It is, to this day, the #1 respiratory hospital in America. It's continued to flourish and continues to help millions of people across the country. Jacob's legacy stands large, like that of so many Jewish leaders across this country. Malcolm Hoenlein and Eric Gertler, they honor her tradition of investing and serving their communities. I'm grateful to be here with you and grateful to add my voice to that recognition and that celebration. Thank you.
Before we hear from Honorary Malcolm Hoenlein, I just wanted to note that in the busy times of representatives and senators, schedules often change. So I wanted to let you know that Senator Dan Sullivan of Alaska, Senator Jim Risch of Idaho, Representative Troy Carter of Louisiana, all had intended to be with us today, but their schedules have changed and they were unable to make it. But I wanted to recognize them for their effort and their intent to join us to celebrate Jewish American Heritage Month. William Daroff is the new CEO of the Conference of Presidents of the Major American Jewish Organizations. Before that, he served as the man in Washington for the Jewish Federations of North America. I'm sure he's familiar to everyone in this room, but I wanted to just personally add 2 notes. One, he's a native of Cleveland, Ohio, which makes it okay in my book. And 2, from personal experience, I know he's a stand-up guy. Please welcome William Daroff.
Thank you very much. Pleased to be introduced by the owner of a professional baseball team in Ohio. Thank you for that, Greg. It is an honor to be with you here as we commemorate Jewish American Heritage Month. And it is an honor to pay tribute to Malcolm, an extraordinary champion for American and global Jewry for the last half a century and counting. Malcolm's steadfast dedication and visionary leadership as my predecessor at the Conference of Presidents of Major American Jewish Organizations has left an indelible mark not only on the Jewish community, but also on American and international policy more broadly. From the movement to free Soviet Jewry, to the loan guarantee crisis, to the Gulf Wars, and to the many attacks against Israel and the Israeli people, Malcolm has been present and a driving force in the conversation to move our people forward. Malcolm is an extraordinary champion for American and global Jewry. No matter who the speaker or the president or the prime minister, he has always been a tireless advocate for our community. Leaders like Malcolm remind us of the crucial role that determination, strong leadership, and even chutzpah play in safeguarding our community's future as open public displays of anti-Semitism become even more commonplace. Under Malcolm's guidance from 1986 until 2020, the Conference of Presidents became the preeminent communal body for advancing the interests of the American Jewish community. Malcolm led the very first trip of Jewish leaders to the Gulf in the 1990s, building relationship between Jewish leaders in the Gulf state, which laid the groundwork for the Abraham Accords, which came to fruition 3 decades later. For the Abraham Accords and Malcolm's role, those relationships are still being cultivated, opening new avenues for peace and cooperation between Israel and the Arab world. Everywhere we go, and Malcolm and I have traveled quite a bit, Malcolm is recognized by seemingly everyone and held in the highest regard. We'll be at hotels all over the world where people will open the door and say, "Mr. Malcolm, welcome back." Mr. Malcolm. Over the decades, he has engaged with everyone and anyone when he thought that it would further the interests of Israel and or the Jewish people. In fact, at the funeral of Shimon Peres, for example, Malcolm, ever punctual, arrived early, and by coincidence, so did then Prince Charles. Malcolm approached Prince Charles, now of course the King of England, and respectfully asked him if he knew that his paternal grandmother, Princess Alice, was buried nearby in the Mount of Olives, literally pointed to it. Prince Charles, of course, did not know, and as a result, Prince Charles scheduled his first ever official visit to Israel and paid respects at her tomb, much to the chagrin of the Foreign Office, as I'm sure you can imagine. From his time in academia, campaigning for Soviet Jewry, and his decades as CEO of the Conference of Presidents, Malcolm has always understood the importance of maintaining our unity within our community. He guides me to do the same every day, with the knowledge that embracing this maxim will be vital in the years ahead to continue to mount the challenges that we face to the U.S.-Israel relationship, as well as the seeming normalization of anti-Semitism that we've heard so much about here today. Let us recognize and take inspiration from Malcolm's exemplary service. As he himself noted several years ago, the Jewish ethos is to teach the next generation. Malcolm mentored and continues to mentor many Jewish leaders, myself included. He is a true icon of American Jewry and remains as indispensable today as he was a half-century ago. During this Jewish American Heritage Month, we celebrate not only the tremendous contributions of Jewish Americans and the contributions that we have made to the mosaic that is America, but also the hard-fought determination and achievements of our forefathers and foremothers and our predecessors. Malcolm's legacy serves as an example for all of us who seek to ensure the continued security and prosperity of the American Jewish community. It is my great honor to serve on Malcolm's shoulders. It is my great honor to follow him, and it is my great honor to serve as his mentee and friend. Thank you very much, Malcolm, for all you do for our people. Are you supposed to speak now?
Let him speak first.
Thank you.
I yield to this.
After that great introduction, Malcolm was supposed to speak, but Senator Risch was able to join us, and so it is my great pleasure to introduce Senator Jim Risch, the junior senator from Idaho. Prior to his election to the Senate, he is a lieutenant governor and governor of Idaho. Senator Risch was first elected to public office at the age of 27 as a prosecutor. He then served 11 terms in the Idaho State Senate before his election to statewide office. He is currently in his third term in the U.S. Senate. Senator Risch is the ranking member on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. He also serves on the Select Committee on Intelligence and the Select Committee on Ethics, quite a combination. Senator Risch is a member of the Bipartisan Task Force for Combating Anti-Semitism and a co-sponsor of the Countering Anti-Semitism Act. He has long been a strong supporter of Israel and the U.S.-Israel alliance. It is a great honor to introduce Senator Jim Risch.
Thank you very much. Thank you. No, thank you for those very kind remarks, and what an honor to share the podium with you. Appreciate it. Look, this is a difficult time for all Jewish people in America. I never thought I'd see the day where things have deteriorated the way they have. I knew things were getting bad over the last couple of years when you actually heard people on the United States House of Representatives give speeches that were anti-Semitic. But what's happened on campuses in recent weeks is intolerable and really an embarrassment for all of us as Americans. Last week, we commemorated Israel's 76th National Day, or 76th National Day, while our friend and ally Israel fights a war against Hamas terrorists. One thing is crystal clear: there should no longer exist, Hamas should no longer exist with an ability to threaten Israel. With all due respect to the President of the United States, his administration continues to hamper Israel's ability to respond. The administration's meddling in Rafah operations and the recent freeze on weapons sales are two prime examples. They're awful. They need to change. One of the things that really troubles me is this attempt by the U.S. National media to provide or determine or define some type of moral equivalence between Israel and Hamas. This is awful, absolutely awful. There is no such equivalence. Here at home, I've been appalled at the rise of anti-Semitism, especially on college campuses, and that's why I'm proud to have co-sponsored the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act, calling on the Department of Education to do more to support Jewish students.
This bill follows my third letter to Education Secretary Cardona last week calling for a strategy to protect students from anti-Semitism and harassment. We will not let this issue go. I applaud everyone in this room who has worked to support Israel and the Jewish community here at home. We need to stick together and we need to be tougher. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
He's already been introduced, our honoree, Malcolm Hoenlein.
I won't. As Henry VI told his 8th wife, don't worry, I won't keep you long. I know that once we pass the 2:15 mark, Ezra has to pay overtime. So I promised him we'll get out, and I think the event itself speaks for itself louder than what we could, and I appreciate, first of all, William, the introduction, and it does show that you can have transitions in Jewish life and political life that can be peaceful and productive and constructive. I want to thank Ezra for the amazing work he does putting this together. I can tell you what an overwhelming job, but more importantly, I want to thank his wife and for her efforts. But we come here and sit down, frankly, even Eric and I, but all the work that is done behind the scenes was done by Ezra, and we're really grateful. And to get this kind of array of senators in the middle of the week to come, and members of the House, is truly a remarkable tribute to the relationships he's established. And of course, they come to see Eric and hope that they'll get an editorial in the U.S. News and World Report, so you guys take note. I only want to say a few words in closing that, it's a very moving thing to come here. It's a reassurance. And it's a day when we should not focus on the negative challenges, but the positive opportunities. That we see how Americans of every faith, every religion, every background, foreign diplomats can come together in a common commitment. That we realize that what we have in common far outweighs our differences. Our enemies seek to divide us. They play on the differences, they exaggerate differences, they exploit them in order to divide and to undermine us. We know that the demonstrations on the campuses of America are not born of native initiative. We know that the Chinese Communist Party has been paying for a lot of these demonstrations. We know that foreign governments have been pouring billions of dollars onto our campuses. And we have a job to save this generation, not to let them dissuade. It doesn't mean that they have to agree and mark in lockstep. It means that they have to know, because when they're questioned and they ask, what river, what sea are you talking about, 90% of them have no idea. They're just mouthing things that have been told to them that they see on the internet. The difference from 80 years ago is not that the world has changed. It's not a more caring place. There's not less indifference. Unfortunately, it took Hitler months to spread a big lie. Today, it can be done in nanoseconds. The thing we hope is that the world learns the lessons of the past. That's why we look back in order to look forward. Our sages taught us that we should ask our parents, and they would tell you, ask your grandparents, and they will explain it to you. Because we learned from previous generations. And we're instructed in the Bible, Zachariah Mosalam, remember the days of old, remember the history, the good and the bad in history, so that your children and your grandchildren will be spared those trials and tribulations. When God instructed us to choose life, He doesn't say it just for you. It says so that your children and grandchildren will live, because the decisions you make, all of you, each one of you, is an important decision maker, even though you don't realize it sometimes. You are all giants. You're all people who can change the world. Many of us were not people who rose from empowered positions or privilege. But because we're committed, and the people here, we broke the Iron Curtain. We took on challenges that everybody said was impossible. And now look back and don't appreciate what an amazing achievement these things were. So we look back so that all of our children of every faith, of every religion, of every creed, will know that they have a more secure future, so that just as we judge a generation of 80 years ago and ask, what did you do at that critical time? You knew, but you didn't want to know. We see the New York Times reports, often buried on back pages, about the murders of Jews, and even when they knew about when Operation Reinhard, when 2,200,000 Jews were killed in a 6-month period, they knew months in advance, but they didn't release it because they didn't want the Nazis to know they broke the codes. And for that, millions paid the price. Today, we will not have any cloak of ignorance to hide our shame for what we don't do, for our failure to act, our failure to respond. We know everything. We go on the internet, you see it immediately. You go on cable TV, you see it even before it happens. We get into every encampment, we get into every demonstration. So we know. The question is, how do we translate it? Will we take the proper steps? Will we look at our parents and grandparents and assure them that they can be proud of us, that we have learned the lessons and will stand up and speak up with pride, that we will pass on our heritages, that each of us are part of the quilt that makes America great. It is not homogeneity, but it is unity that is necessary. That we come together and know what we share about our future, about the aspirations for our children and grandchildren and the world that we want to leave behind. One of the most central principles of Jewish life is hakarat hatov, recognizing the good. That we thank those who stood up, those who speak up, those who engage in positive actions. And that is why we have the righteous Gentiles that are memorialized in Israel, those who stood up against the Nazis, against the odds. There are very few who saved Jews because they recognized that life is meaningless if you don't value it, your own, but also that of others. And that we have an opportunity today to stand up at a time when we see so many values distorted, that the highest criminal court in the world, the International Criminal Court, could so debase the rule of law by issuing warrants or attempting to, and likely to, for leaders of a democracy fighting against one of the most evil forces in the world and equating with those who were responsible for massacres that are unspeakable. So we have to make sure that there is those correctives, that we don't let us and our future generations suffer for it, for our failure to act, for our failure to speak up. You know, we begin in our prayers every day with the words Moda Ani, thankful I am. And the question is, why doesn't it say, I am thankful? And the answer is that the first thing you got to think about in the world is not the I, but the thanks. That we have to show appreciation to God, to our fellow man and woman, to our society, and especially to our country that has given us so many privileges, so many rights, that we should never take it for granted, because when you take it for granted, you lose them. If we don't appreciate the miracles that we have all witnessed in our lifetime, every day virtually we see miracles, we're just not conscious of them. So we have to sit back sometime and have an event like this where we can express appreciation, where we can take stock of all the good and reinforce it, and commit and recommit to stand against the forces of divisiveness, of evil, to look at the promise and the prospects and the possibilities of America, not just the problems. I think that Jewish Heritage Week is a time not just for the Jewish community, but for all of us. But while the Jewish community is under particular assault this year, when we see people trying to erase our past in order to erase our future, that we have to all stand committed against it. Because while Jews are often the first victims, they're never the last. Everybody, all of society ultimately pays the price. So again, I want to thank everybody who's responsible for this. I want to thank all of you for coming. This is the first time in all the times I've been here where the crowd actually stayed through the whole thing. And I think that's a real tribute to all of you. And thank you very much for being here.
Hold on just a minute. We'll close with a few remarks from Rabbi Levi Shem Tov. But I want to ask you once again to recognize our two great honorees, Malcolm Hoenlein and Eric Gertler. Awards like this are often given at the end of people's careers. This is not the end of either of their careers. I hope their leadership continues to be an inspiration for all of us to do what we can to make the world a better place. Thank you for coming. We'll see you again next year. Rabbi Shemko.
This is what they call the convocation. But after a standing ovation asking people to sit back down, it's tough. So since Ezra has to pay until 2:30, I'll do what I would only do for a very good friend of mine like Ezra Friedlander and close as the door opens and everyone leaves. So please be seated. I'll be very quick. Obviously, the cornerstone of Jewish life is the Torah. Last week, at the beginning of the Torah reading, the same word was used 3 times. Vayomer, Amor, and Amarta. And Rashi asks, why was this word repeated? We have to learn something from every extra word. And every word written says something and also does not say something else and is very precise. And maybe that's why we have so many lawyers who are Jews. And more Marta, Rashi says, Lahazir Hagedolim Alaktanim. So the older Kohanim, the older of the priestly caste, will admonish those who are younger and teach them the proper way. The Rebbe teaches, the Lubavitcher Rebbe says, Lahaz here doesn't just mean to admonish, but it comes from the word brighten, like the word Zohar. And the idea is that when we educate, we have to illuminate, not just admonish, because then it's more effective. This week we read about Bahar. Bahar is the mountain. And the mountain is where you get a greater view. But I also like to say that the mountain is from where a nation gets governed. You have the extremists here on the sides, and as people become more moderate, they rise in prominence till the most prominent people are the ones towards the center. They can hear people from all sides. All sides can hear them. The people shouting on one side of the mountain or all the way on the other are heard by almost nobody. And it also allows you to get a bigger view of the future. Standing only in an echo chamber where you are doesn't give you a reflection of any views but your own. So I think that those 2 bookends, last week's Torah reading and this week's Torah reading, show us Lahazir Hagedolim Alakatanim, not just that the older shall admonish the younger, but we look into the big picture issues and then we bring them down into the smaller, minute details. So when I am here, which I believe I've been here every single time since it started. Next year will be the 20th one, God willing. But when I see sitting to my right someone as iconic in our community as Malcolm Hoenlein, who knows me, by the way, longer than he knows anyone in this room, including his family, his wife and kids, because he knew me when I was born. Our block in Northeast Philadelphia, Griffith Street, bore 2 great iconic personalities. One was Malcolm Hoenlein, the other one was the general manager of the Phillies, Reuben Amaro Jr. And I can't say Lahavdil because he's Jewish. But Malcolm also has a very significant and close relationship to our family, because just as he spoke about rebuilding Judaism and not being afraid, it was not too long after the Holocaust where his parents, who were already in America, helped to rebuild Jewish life in our city. And his mother, Mrs. Hoenlein, the revered Mrs. Hoenlein, was a very highly regarded teacher and taught every one of the children in my family, except me, I was in a different class, but all my brothers and my sister learned how to read Hebrew from Mrs. Hoenlein, as did thousands of other children in Philadelphia. Now, when Malcolm says that we have to be sure that our parents and our grandparents look down on us and are proud, I know how proud Malcolm's mother is of him, because I remember her sitting in my mother's living room and regaling her with all the stories of his exploits. First, he was a huge student activist at Temple University. Then he did the Philadelphia JCRC. So we know Malcolm, as I like to use this term on the Hill, since it was a big deal that he knew us. But then he went to New York, to the JCRC, and to the Conference of Presidents, and the rest is literally history. I just want to say one thing about the one who introduced him, William, is that Pirkei Avos, the ethics of our sages, says, Loi ha-baishon loimed, someone who is bashful will never learn. V'loi ha-kapdon melamed, somebody who is too particular will never be able to teach. Right? That's why Malcolm's mother was such a great teacher, because even if I wasn't in her class, the whole school knew of her great nature. Transition in major organizations, especially Jewish ones, is a very tricky thing. And too often does not work out so well, to the detriment of the constituency. The Conference of Presidents, I think, is a shining example of a much better way. Because instead of having someone who serves at the helm for decades and then has a successor who's nice to him for a month and then the two never meet again, what we're seeing at the top of the Conference of Presidents today is a partnership, a mentorship. What we say, dor ledor yishabach ma'asecha, we talk about praising God from generation to generation. When it's a quick split, there's so much of administrative and institutional memory that's lost. Malcolm taking the time and making the effort, and William also taking the time and making the effort, so that the transition of leadership in the Conference of Presidents of major American Jewish organizations at this, the most trying time that I could remember in my own life, is a very, very important thing. Malcolm was talking about on campus how the students protesting against Israel are so ignorant. One of the worst campuses was George Washington University, right near here. And it's a campus on which we're very active. Chabad has a very significant presence. And I was at the encampment every day or two, just so I could see for myself what was happening, because people here on the Hill wanted to know. And they actually came to GW, and soon thereafter the encampment was gone. One of them had to summon the mayor to the Hill, but that's a whole long story for another time. And I was listening in on some of the conversations on the street there, and I hear the following. Just so that you wouldn't possibly know the person in question, I hear the following. Hey, Stacy, what are you doing here? I didn't know you were into this stuff. She said, I don't know, something about genocide in a river or whatever. She says, you're like against Israel? She goes, no, I signed up for Code Pink like 2 years ago, and I just got a text on the network, get over here, they're serving shawarma. That's who's demonstrating against Israel. When they cleaned out the encampment, there were 12 out of hundreds. There were 12 GW students there. So ignorance is at the core of a lot of this mess, is ignorance and manipulation. So people like Malcolm, who stood up against these bigots back when they weren't nearly as big as they are now, back in Philadelphia and then in New York, and then on behalf of the American Jewish community and around the world in places we all go to today, but people wouldn't venture too many years ago, speaks very, very loudly. So I'm just a humble, younger neighbor of his, a student of his mother, but I could say as my closing line, first of all, thank you to Ezra and to Mrs. Friedlander for putting this together every year. But the highest compliment I can say is that Mr. and Mrs. Hoenlein Sr., even though they've left this world, they're Aleichem HaSholem, they're on high. We have no doubt, Malcolm, that they continue to be very, very proud of you. Hashem is proud of you. The Jewish people still need you for as long as God will give you koyach. And may you continue to do this work for a very, very long time. Mr. Gertler, I don't know you, but I've heard a lot about you. And if even half of it is true, it was worth it everybody coming here together to pay you some tribute. Thank you.